The typical worker aged 55 to 64 has one 401k holding about $107,000. That is the median straight from Vanguard's 2026 report. Not the average, the median, the person standing right in the middle of the pack. Think about that for a second. These are people 5 to 10 years from their final paycheck, and most of them will never see $1 million in that account. Not because they didn't earn enough over a career, not because the stock market betrayed them. Something quieter happened, slowly, across 30 years, and almost nobody pointed at it while it was happening. So here's the whole thesis in one line. The reason most retirees never reach $1 million is not income. It is behavior, and it is structure. Everything else is a detail. So what does that gap actually cost you when the paychecks stop? Let's be honest about the math, because the math is the story. $100,000 drawn down carefully gives you maybe $4,000 a year in safe spending. $4,000 for the entire year. Now add Social Security. The average retired worker collects around $2,000 a month in 2026, roughly $24,000 a year. So stack those together, and you are living on something like $28,000. That is the reward for 40 years of showing up. Meanwhile, the person who reached $1 million is pulling $40,000 a year from their portfolio, plus that same Social Security check. Same job title, same commute, same alarm clock going off at 6 a.m. for decades. One of them retires relaxed. The other retires doing math in the grocery aisle, quietly putting things back. The gap between those two lives was never really about salary. And the unsettling part is that it was mostly decided by choices that felt like nothing at the time they were made. So here's what I want you to do. Stay with me to the end. I am going to walk you through 3 things, in order. First, the small leaks, the money that slips out without you noticing. Then the big structural forces, the ones that quietly set the ceiling on your whole life. Then the handful of boring things the people who actually reach $1 million do differently. And that final piece, the last one, ties every other point in this video together. It is the one nobody markets to you, because you cannot really sell it. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let's start with the leaks, the small ones, the ones that feel like absolutely nothing on an ordinary Tuesday and cost a fortune by the time you're 60. But first, notice something hiding inside that opening number. Vanguard's 2026 report puts the average 401k balance at about $168,000. Yet the median is only $44,000. That enormous gap is not a rounding error. It means a small cluster of very large accounts is dragging the average way up, while the person in the middle sits far below it. The average is a story about a few winners. The median is the story about almost everybody else. Widen the lens further, and the Federal Reserve's 2022 survey found the typical American household holds only about $87,000 in retirement accounts. Half of households have less than that. That is the real starting line. Leak number 1. Your employer offers to match part of what you put into your 401k. A common setup is 50 cents on the dollar, up to 6% of your pay. Read that slowly. Your company is offering to hand you money, simply for saving your own money. It is the closest thing to a guaranteed return that exists in all of finance. A 50% match is a 50% gain before the market does a single thing. And yet a real share of workers never contribute enough to capture the full match. They leave it sitting on the table, year after year after year. Picture your boss walking to your desk every single Friday, holding out a $100 bill, and you saying, "No thanks, I'm good." That is what skipping the match actually is. Except it is silent and automatic, and nobody ever hands you a receipt for what you just gave away. So why does one little contribution number matter so much stretched over a career? Hold that thought, because it is about to get worse. Leak number 2. You change jobs. You have got a few $1,000s sitting in the old 401k, and a form shows up asking what you want to do with it. And a genuinely shocking number of people just take the cash. They pay the income taxes on it, they pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty on top, and they spend whatever is left. Research on job changers keeps finding the same thing. A big chunk of people cash out instead of rolling the money over. On a small balance, it feels harmless. It's a few $1,000s, still young, plenty of time to build it back later. But that money was never really a few $1,000s. Left alone for 30 years, a $5,000 balance can quietly grow into 40 or 50,000. So you didn't spend 5,000. You spent the retirement-sized version of it. It is like eating the seed corn instead of planting it. Feels fine at dinner. Costs you every future harvest. And there is a specific reason those small numbers detonate later, which is the next leak. Leak number 3, the quiet killer. Fees. Here is what almost nobody tells you about the fund sitting inside your account. It charges you a percentage of your money every single year, whether the market goes up, down, or sideways. Now, the good news first. Fees have fallen hard. Morningstar reported that the asset-weighted average fund expense ratio dropped to about 0.32% in 2025. That is 32 cents for every $100. Basically nothing. But plenty of people are still parked in funds charging a full 1% or more. And 1% does not sound scary. 1%. Who cares? Here is who cares. On a balance that grows for 35 years, a 1% annual fee can quietly swallow a double-digit slice of your final nest egg. Not 1% of it. We are talking tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes into 6 figures, skimmed off the top one thin sliver at a time. Think of it this way. $1 the fund quietly takes today is not just $1. It is that dollar plus every year of growth it would have earned over the next 3 decades. The fee compounds against the saver. At the exact same rate, the money was supposed to compound for them. It is a slow leak in a tire you can't see and can't hear. You just noticed decades later that you somehow never arrived where you were headed. So those are the leaks. Now let's talk about the forces that really decide it. Because the leaks are annoying, sure. But the structure underneath is what actually sets the ceiling. And you can see that ceiling sitting right there in the data. The Federal Reserve's 2022 survey put the median retirement savings for households aged 55 to 64 at around $185,000. Comfortable maybe, $1 million, not close. These are people at their peak earning years, standing at the finish line, and the middle of the pack is nowhere near the headline number. There is also the small matter of who even gets a seat. The Labor Department found that as of 2025, about 72% of private sector workers had access to a retirement plan at work. That means nearly 3 in 10 are building nothing through a job at all, which stacks the deck before the game even begins. The biggest structural force is time, and almost everyone on Earth underrates it. Compounding is not a straight line. That's the thing people miss. It is a curve that barely twitches for years and then bends nearly straight up near the end. Picture 2 savers side by side. The first starts at 25 and puts in a few $100s a month. The second starts at 35, saves the exact same monthly amount, and really tries to catch up. In most versions of this math, the one who started 10 years earlier retires with roughly double. Same contribution, double the ending balance. The only difference was 10 extra years of quiet growth at the very start, the boring stretch where nothing looked like it was happening. That is the cruel joke buried inside compounding. The most powerful years are the ones that feel the most pointless while you're living them. Nothing is visibly growing, so it feels safe to wait. And waiting until you feel ready is the single most expensive habit in personal finance. Run the numbers, and the pattern is always the same. The first 10 years quietly build the base, and the last 10 years, riding on that base, produce all the fireworks. Skip the base, and there is simply nothing for the fireworks to stand on. Next force. Your saving rate matters far more than your investment picks. Let's be honest, most people pour all their energy into chasing the perfect fund, the hot stock, the clever tax move, but the single biggest lever you control is simply the percentage of your income you actually set aside. Someone saving 15% into plain index funds will crush someone saving 3% inside a supposedly genius portfolio. And it is not close. Vanguard found that many auto-enrollment plans default new hires in at just 4% of pay. 4% is a fine starting point, but on its own, it is nowhere near enough to get you there. It's like filling a swimming pool with a teaspoon. Technically, water is going in, you'll just be extremely old by the time it's full. And here's the quiet catch. Most people get dropped in at that default number and then never touch it again for their entire career, which sets up the very next problem. That next problem has a name. Lifestyle creep. You get a raise, and within about a month, that raise has vanished. Not stolen, absorbed. A slightly nicer car, a bigger apartment, the upgraded phone, the third streaming service you genuinely forgot you were paying for. Your income went up, and your saving rate stayed flat. Or actually fell. Here is the trapdoor underneath it. Every dollar you train yourself to spend today is a dollar you now have to replace in retirement every year for the rest of your life. Raising your lifestyle permanently raises the bar you have to clear to ever stop working. It is a treadmill that speeds up a little every time you finally get comfortable. And most people never even notice they're running, because the belt only moves an inch at a time. Almost none of them notice the money they never invested at all, which is a strange one worth naming. A lot of people who do manage to save still leave the money just sitting in cash. It feels safe. Cash doesn't crash, cash doesn't scare you. But across decades, cash quietly loses to inflation. Every single year, guaranteed. Prices climb a few percent a year, and your idle cash sits there, slowly buying less than it did last year. Being too afraid to invest carries a cost too. You just never get a statement in the mail showing you what it took. Playing it totally safe is its own kind of risk, the slow kind, the kind that only shows up 30 years too late. So that's the structure. Now for the part you actually clicked for. What do the people who reach $1 million do differently? Here's the twist you probably won't expect. What they do is boring. Almost insultingly, unfairly boring. First, they automate everything. They set the contribution once, and then they never look at it again. The money leaves the paycheck before they can feel it, before they can spend it, before they can talk themselves out of it. This is not superhuman willpower. It is the exact opposite of willpower. It is deleting the decision entirely, so it never has to be made again. Vanguard's own data shows this in black and white. When a plan automatically enrolls people, participation climbs to around 86%. When it's left up to raw human motivation, far fewer people ever sign up at all. The lesson is brutal and also kind of freeing. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Build one good enough system, and then get out of your own way. And the systems are quietly winning. Vanguard's median balance climbed from about $38,000 to $44,000 in a single year, largely because automatic enrollment and escalation keep pulling people in and nudging their contributions higher while they do nothing. And the second thing they do makes that quiet system even quieter. Second, they keep their costs low, almost always with broad index funds. Not because index funds are some magic trick, but because they shut off the fee leak we just talked about. When your expense ratio sits near that 0.32% average instead of a full 1%, you keep more of every year's growth. And then that difference compounds on itself for decades. They are not trying to beat the market. They are trying to quietly own the whole thing cheaply and then get out of its way. It's the difference between rowing the boat the whole trip and just letting the river carry you downstream. Both of you reach the sea. Only one of you arrives exhausted. And the cost gap is not small over a lifetime. Shave 0.2% off the fees every year for 35 years, and the money kept can easily run into 6 figures. And the third thing they do is the one that actually separates the millionaires from everyone else. Third, and this is the entire game, they do not touch it. They do not cash it out when they switch jobs. They do not panic sell when the market drops 30% in a bad year. They do not tinker every quarter chasing a slightly better idea they read about online. Fidelity reported a record number of 401k millionaires in 2025, somewhere around 595,000 people. And notice what that number is not. It is not 5 million, it is a small club against many millions of accounts. Most accounts never come anywhere close. The ones that make it share a personality, and it is not raw ambition, it is patience. And when you look closely at how those people actually got there, it is almost never brilliance. It is stamina. Steady contributions left completely alone, riding through crashes and recoveries and long, boring, flat years for decades on end. The market fell hard in 2008. It fell again in 2020. It fell again in 2022. The future millionaires just kept holding through every one of them. They let the curve do its slow, patient work. And that brings us to the real reason, the one thing that ties this entire video together. Now, let me be honest with you, because this is exactly where a lot of finance videos start lying. You may not actually need $1 million. A million is a round number. It is a headline, a rule of thumb, a nice clean target for a thumbnail. What you truly need depends on your real spending, your social security, whether your house is paid off, and where you live. Plenty of people retire completely fine on less than that, especially with a paid-off home and modest tastes. So please do not treat a million as some pass-fail grade on your worth. And here's the harder truth on the other side. Some people genuinely cannot save right now, and that is real. If your rent eats most of your paycheck, if you're carrying a family on one income, if a medical bill once wiped you out, that is not a character flaw. The structure really is stacked against a lot of people, and telling them to simply skip the latte is both useless and a little insulting. So I am not claiming everyone can flip one switch and get rich. What I am saying is narrower. For the people who do have even a little room to save, the difference between reaching a million and never getting close usually has almost nothing to do with the size of that room. It comes down to what you actually do with it. So here's the real reason, the one I promised you at the start. It is not income. It is not luck. It is not even how smart or sophisticated your investments are. The real reason most retirees never reach a million is that they interrupt it. They stop and they start. They cash out the old account between jobs. They pause their contributions in a scary year to feel safer. They switch their whole strategy every time a headline spooks them. They yank the plant out of the ground every few months just to check whether the roots are growing yet. And the roots naturally never get the chance to. The people who reach a million did one genuinely radical thing. They left it alone. They let time do the one thing time is actually good at, which is turning small, steady, uninterrupted deposits into something enormous. Think about that for a second. The person who does basically nothing for 30 years tends to beat the person who is constantly managing, adjusting, and optimizing. Not once in a while, usually. The tinkerer feels productive. The tinkerer is genuinely busy. And the tinkerer, over and over again, sells low, buys high, pays extra fees, and taxes their own compounding to death with attention. So here's the line I want you to walk away with. Wealth is not built by doing more. It is built by not undoing it. The market does the growing. Your only real job is to stop opening the oven every 10 minutes to see if the bread is done yet. Leave the door shut. Let it bake. That is the whole secret, and it is exactly why almost nobody talks about it. You cannot sell a person the advice to simply do nothing. Picture two workers, same company, same salary, hired the very same week. The first one sets up her 401k, captures the full employer match, picks one cheap index fund, and then honestly forgets the login password. For 30 years, she does nothing at all. The second one is sharp and engaged. He watches the market. He switches funds when one looks better. He cashes out once between jobs, pauses everything in 2020, and jumps back in a little too late. He works far harder at his money than she ever does. 30 years later, she has quietly crossed $1 million. He is sitting somewhere near that $107,000 median we opened with, wondering what he did wrong. He did not do too little. He did too much. The one who forgot won. Most of those near retirees stuck at the median were never lazy. They were just busy interrupting the one thing that only needed to be left alone. If this changed how you see your money, share it with someone who needs it, then like and subscribe. Your future self is watching.